Hello everyone and welcome to another video. In today's video we're going to be talking about 10 surprising rules, aspects, and errors in Axis and Allies 1940 2nd edition. Number 10. Scrambling. Scrambling is good for up to 3 fighters or tactical bombers. If there is a sea zone where there are 2 land territories adjacent to the sea territory, like Korea and Japan, 6 fighter or tactical bombers can be scrambled if there is an air base on either. However, if there are 6 fighters and or tactical bombers on Korea and 0 in Japan, only 3 can be scrambled. You must have 3 on either territory to utilize these 6 fighters and tactical bombers scrambles. Number 9. Malta. What's the deal with Malta? Have you ever just stared at a setup board and asked yourself, why the heck did the British start with those units there? Now, for some historical context, this bastion on Malta is largely what is to thank for the survival of the British in North Africa. This island is how they received supplies, despite it being attacked, just relentlessly hammered for months at a time by the Axis, by at first the Italians and then later by the Germans. In the game, however, these details are lost. All that affects economic income really are convoy rolls, territory loss, and strategic bombing campaigns. House rules may change up the ballgame a bit, but in the vanilla version of this game, Malta simply has potentially valuable units stuck there, save the aircraft, for usually the duration of the game. A similar situation is true of Japan and the Pacific with the Caroline Islands. However, the motivation to take the Carolines is much more tangible than with Malta, which has neither an air base nor a naval base, and simply poses kind of almost a useless gain for the Italians unless they want to build a naval base there. And given their small IPC income per turn already, this doesn't seem like the best economic option for them. So Malta's kind of a weird aspect of this game, but there it is. Number 8. Biased neutrals are treated as separate entities, but strict neutrals are not. Now, this on the surface seems like it makes sense, right? But if you think about it, even just 2 levels deep, attacking a strict neutral would seem to not affect all other strict neutrals in the game. This doesn't really make sense politically. For example, if Japan decides to attack Mongolia and Russia at the same time on turn 1, Mongolia is technically a strict neutral at that point, and as a result, all the other strict neutrals in the game will become pro-allied. But if this were the actual war, I highly doubt that Turkey or Sweden or Argentina would really care that much that Mongolia was attacked. Now, I understand that it's for the sake of the mechanics of the game, but if you think about it, even for a little bit, it starts to not really make sense. And the rules with the neutrals kind of does. Some of it doesn't make sense, and some of it impacts the game in semi-important ways, and some of it doesn't. But yeah, that's number 8. Biased and strict neutrals are treated separately, where biased neutrals are treated as their own little entities, while strict neutrals are treated as a holistic single entity. Number 7. Now, this isn't necessarily a rule or error, but an aspect of the game. It should be noted that following the prescribed order of play from the rulebook ensures that fairness stays a main factor in the game and that people stay honest. One aspect of the in-person version of the game is that tensions sometimes get high. This game and the battles that happen in it become significant emotional events simply because the amount of time and effort you've put into the game. Seeing this starting off with purchases, concluding that, and then moving on to declaring attacks, concluding that, and then moving on to non-combat movement, concluding that, and so on, should be observed as closely as possible. Unless you're playing a very casual type game where you're just kind of being loose with the rules, then maybe you shouldn't do this as much. But if you're trying to figure out who is the better player and trying to be competitive, then following the set sequence of the game becomes much more important. To keep the game clean, nice, and fair, clearly separating these phases is an important rule to observe, lest the game become if I was allowed to do this, then I would have won, or because I wasn't allowed to do this move, even though I meant to, I lost. Now, making sure that you do everything you're supposed to is part of the fun of the game, and that one must carefully carry out each aspect of their own turn so as to make as few mistakes as possible. To make mistakes is to do what happened in the actual war, and those mistakes have big consequences. Some people's thresholds differ based on level of seriousness, as I've said. If you're just playing to have a casual, fun time, then maybe allowing each other to place units you forgot to place is okay. The bottom line to this is that the game has so many rules and is so complex that some rules are unknowingly ignored, and the balance of the game can therefore be upset. This is an aspect of Axis and Allies that when people jump into it, I'm sure everyone is aware of at some level, but oftentimes people will proceed without really taking a chance to look at the rules. Unknown unknowns come to mind, and while tensions create arguments that create rule-checking moments, these are not ubiquitous. Playing online can certainly eliminate the potential for human error in this game, but Axis and Allies will test the limits of your patience, mind, and forward thinking and planning. Now, the most classic example I can remember from this game is when a friend used the kamikaze chips the Japanese get in any offensive rather than their prescribed defensive manner. And none of us really knew that rule until later on in the game when this was checked, but every A&A game is a learning opportunity, and you should be checking the rules as frequently as possible and underlining in the book. This is a practice that I've done over the years. It's easier for the less obvious rules to jump out at you when you're reading the book. Number 6. While the Axis only have to capture and hold 6 victory cities in the Pacific map and 8 victory cities on the Atlantic map, or the European map, the Allies have to hold all the Axis capitals for a full round of play. This is realistic to the actual war, but in most games I have experienced, this has never been achieved. Needless to say, victory can be extremely difficult to achieve if the Axis player is competent in any fashion. Number 5. Friendly neutral territories containing no infantry, such as northern Persia, cannot be blitzed through. However, if an enemy friendly neutral does not have units in its territory, it can be blitzed through. This is a rule that doesn't make too much sense, but has to be followed anyway. Number 4. Factories can only be built on your original territories with your national markers printed onto the board. As I've described in previous A&A videos, for example, in China, Japan cannot build a major industrial complex on the Chinese mainland, despite the fact that China has 3 potential territories Japan could build factories. Number 3. In the rulebook, Western and Eastern Canada are not labeled correctly in accordance with the map that I have with my version of Axis and Allies 1940 2nd edition. Now, it should be mentioned here that the virtual map I have been using does include the Yukon and British Columbia territories. However, in my version, my printed version of the game, which I've used for many games now, the rulebook cites, and I will quote it here, the Canadian province of Alberta, Saskatchewan / Manitoba on the European map is adjacent to the Yukon Territory and British Columbia territories on the Pacific map. And I underlined it and kind of wrote Western Canada with an asterisk next to it. Because if you look at the printed version, as I've said, all my game board has is Western Canada. Now, if you compare that with, I guess, the updated online version, it includes British Columbia on the southernmost portion of that territory and the Yukon Territory with no IPC value in the northern portion. Now, I'm not sure why this split occurred, and I'm not quite sure why my board specifically has that weird little inconsistency, but there it is, clear as day. I'm not sure how many boards out there have this issue, but I'm guessing my board was produced either at an in-between time or something like that, because the rulebook has the updated map, and my board appears to be the old version of, or the older edition of the game. I'm not really sure what the deal is on this. If any of you out there want to kind of comment on why this is the way it is, let me know. But yeah. Number 2. Damaged battleships and aircraft carriers can still move 2 spaces, and battleships retain their ability to bombard. Now, in a realistic war scenario, either damaged capital unit or ship may be completely non-functional and only able to trot along slowly, as was seen so many times, such as with the USS Yorktown throughout the Pacific theater of World War II. The ability of carriers to store aircraft is lost, which makes sense. However, the battleship remains able to bombard regardless. While there is some contention on numerous ANA forums regarding this, in this Axis and Allies player's opinion, retaining that ability while a battleship is damaged seems a bit foobar. But I digress. Number 1, South America as a strict neutral, Spain as a strict neutral. South America as a strict neutral. In the actual war, several South American nations were sympathetic to the Axis powers, including Argentina, which attempted to help protect a German light cruiser, the Admiral Graf Spee, on its flight from the British Royal Navy. However, due to fears that Allied intelligence may get their hands on the ship, it was scuttled instead. Now, on the board, Brazil is cited as pro-Allied, while the remainder of the continent is cited as true neutral. While Brazil was certainly pro-Allied, leaning post-1942 due to America's Lend-Lease program as well as Axis attacks on their shipping, and it sent some of its military to the Allied war effort in Europe, the game's label for Chile and Argentina as strict neutrals is debatable. For further evidence of this, I encourage you to read about Operation Bolivar, in which the Germans were allowed to maintain an intricate intelligence network based in Argentina and spreading out to the countries of Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, Brazil, Cuba, Mexico, and others. In this, paper-based and radio intelligence was smuggled or transmitted, respectively, back to Europe via Spanish ships or over the airwaves. Additionally, in Argentina, a significant German minority existed in the country, and although America unilaterally encouraged all of South and Central America to declare war on the Axis immediately, the Argentine government in particular did not declare war until just near the end of the war, long after it was a foregone conclusion in 1945. It is often described, even to this day, that both Chile and Argentina maintain a special relationship with Germany. It should also be mentioned that the country of Panama, although that's labeled as just being a part of America, was largely pro-Axis in leadership until the fall of 1941, when a coup replaced the pro-Axis leader Arnulfo Arias. If one is to consider Brazil to be pro-Allied, which it certainly was after 1942 when it declared war on the Germans, even though it was more of a strict neutral in 1940, then a case should be considered for Chile and Argentina as well. An even more potent of a case, however, lies with Spain, which sent its own blue division to fight on the Eastern Front with the Axis coalition there. If one is to consider Brazil pro-Allied, then one should at least consider Spain to be pro-Axis. Now, I realize in this case that the balance of the game might be upset, so I can possibly understand why Brazil was left as the only pro-Allied nation in South America, and Spain was left as a strict neutral. However, historically, I don't think it's accurate, and I believe that a possible good house rule might be to allow Spain to be pro-Axis. So, are there any rules, aspects, or things about Axis and Allies 1940 2nd edition that you might change? Anything about the game that raises an eyebrow with you? Feel free to comment in the comment section below, and to stay up to date in the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell button, and like this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Ciao.